Hey there, welcome back. It's Chorus Girl Quilting, and it's time to make binding for the Tilda Soiree quilt. So I have my binding fabric here. It's the same fabric as the background of the quilt, so it won't have a frame per se, but I think it's still going to look great. So here's how we do binding. First, you have to know the measurement of the entire, I don't think you call it circumference. Again, geometry people, help me out here. Is it the circumference even though it's a rectangle? But regardless, you have to know how long the quilt is, all four sides combined. So we know my quilt is 60 inches wide by 80 inches long. So if you, and I'm going to use a calculator, even though I kind of can do this one in my head because it's nice even numbers with zeros on the end. So I have 60, I have two 60s plus 60. Then I'm going to add 80 and 8 plus 160. So I have 120 plus 160 equals, 120 plus 160 equals, my calculator's not working. 120 plus 160 equals 280 inches all the way around the quilt. So what I know about my fabric is that it is 40. I'm going to safely say I can get 40 inches of length from my fabric, and I'm cutting it across the width of the fabric from selvage edge to selvage edge. I'm going to cut those off, and there's some sewing we have to do to put all the strips together. I'm going to cut 2.5 inch strips of fabric. And so I know that my width of fabric is about 42 inches. Just to be on the safe side, I'm going to say 40. So I am going to divide this 280 by, you know what? I am going to say 42 because I think that's terrible. No. I want to go back to 40. So I'm going to divide 40 into 280. So divided by 40 equals 7, of course. And so that means I need 7 strips of 40-inch wide fabric to do my binding. I'm going to cut 8 because I will lose some of that length. And that's, I will lose some of that length as I stitch those together. And that's just the exact number I need to get 280 inches of binding. And I need some extra at the end so I can sew those ends together and close up the edge of the quilt. That gives me, if I do 8 strips, that gives me plenty of fabric to play with that. So I have this cool, they call this a ruler, but this is a Creative Grids ruler that allows you to cut different size strips all at once without having to move your ruler. It has these openings cut in it that your rotary blade fits into. And basically you place it on your fabric. There's a little line here. You want to line up your fold. There is also a 0 line here to start so you can clear off the edge of your fabric. Straighten up the edge of your fabric. So I'm going to do that first, and I'm not going to be quite in the shot here, but I'm going to cut that off, and I'm going to leave my ruler here. Now, I know I want 2.5 inch strips. So down here, there's a little key that says the star is for 1.5 inch cuts, and a square is a 2.5 inch cut. And all along this ruler are squares spaced every 2.5 inches. So I don't have to move my ruler. My cuts are going to be nice and straight every single time, and my binding strips are going to be nice and even. You can use this for other things, other quilting things too. I just haven't taken the time to really study that up. If all I do use this for is to cut strips of fabric that are 1.5 or 2.5 inches wide, I'm happy. So here we go. So we're going Here's the first one. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, ooh, 8. I can just get 8 strips. Okay, so what you see here, there's my little 0 edge. Whoops, it didn't get quite cut off. There's my little 0 edge, and now I have 8 nice straight. Uh-oh. Sometimes that happens. The blade doesn't want to, it doesn't cut all the way through. Nice, even 2.5 inch strips of fabric that are ready to make binding. So next step happens over at the machine. Hold on. Okay, so here we are at the machine, and we're going to sew together these strips of fabric. And notice I left the selvage edges on them because I'm not going to, what I'm going to do now, they're not going to get in the way. So I'm going to, well, the machine being on would be helpful. So I'm going to take one strip and lay it right side up. And then make sure, I don't know what's going to happen here. I am going to kind of pay attention to the direction of the fabric. Yeah. So I'm going to take one strip of fabric and lay it right side up, parallel to the edge of my table. And I'm going to take this piece, and I'm using the edge of this, the white edge of this selvage as my guide here to line this up. And I'm going to, I think I'll draw a line this time just to make, so it kind of, you can kind of see what I'm doing. And I'm going to place a pin just to hold it in, ouch. Oh, goodness. I'm bleeding. Ow. Ugh. Hold tight. Got to get something to stop it. Man, I just stuck that good. Just in the right place for it to bleed that much. Wow. That doesn't usually happen. So, okay. So while we're stopping the bleeding, I'm going to pull this right here, and I'm going to, where these little notches kind of are, I'm going to draw my good old diagonal line with my pencil. Lined up a little better, like this. And then I am going to stitch. Let's see if I stopped bleeding enough to, yeah, I did. I'm going to stitch along this line like so. Sorry, it's a little fiddly. So we're going to do this. And then I'm going to do a second, well, just for time's sake, I'll show you what that looks like. So when I pull this, when I fold this back, then I have this diagonal seam that's nice and even. And the reason we do that seam instead of just butting them up together on the straight sides is that when you come, this is eventually going to get folded in half. And so that kind of alleviates some of the bulk at that point where the seam comes together. If I did just a straight seam, I would have like 4 layers of fabric there. And this way, when you come past this, you just have a couple. And then I would go through, and I can chain piece these, and I would go through and trim off these triangles of fabric. And as I press this in half, as you'll see at the ironing board in a minute, I will just fold this seam open and fold it over like that. So, okay, I'm going to keep sewing these together, and I'll meet you at the ironing board. Still sewing. Hold on. Okay, here we are at the ironing board. I have started pressing my binding. You just press it in half, like so. My iron just came on. And I'm now at one of those seams that I talked about. Sorry, I'm not looking at the camera because if I press my fingers with this thing, it's going to hurt a lot worse than that pin sticking me a while ago. So here I am at one of the seams, and I'm going to kind of press it open with my fingers, then hit it with the iron so it comes open. And then I just continue to fold and press until I get to the end of my binding strip, my continuous binding. So I'm going to keep doing that, and I will meet you back over at the sewing machine. Hold tight. Still pressing. Be right back. Okay, pressing's done. So what I'm doing is gathering up my binding, just kind of stacking it. And then sometimes this works and sometimes it doesn't. When I get ready to sew the binding on, I will kind of sling it over my shoulder and it just feeds off. That doesn't always work. Sometimes it just all falls off my shoulder into a pile in my lap. And so this just helps kind of keep it nice and straight and keeps it from tangling up as I go. So as soon as okay, there's the end like that. And whoops, sorry, I'm stepping over a sleeping dog. So I'll meet you back here by the machine after I reset. Hold tight. Okay, once again, my camera shut down while I was trying to get set up to do this. And the funny thing is, my camera has to be sitting where my quilt needs to go. So I had to do some real finagling to get this to work. But hopefully I can show you the essentials at least. So I've got my quilt rolled up here so it isn't in the way, it doesn't knock the camera. And I'm just going to do a really short segment here to give you the gist of what goes on all the way around the quilt. So first, I'm going to find a start place. And I usually start sewing my bindings on at the bottom. It doesn't really matter because you don't really see it when it's finished anyway, where the stop and start is. So I'm going to take my stack of binding here, and we'll see how far this goes. I'm going to stack it. Let's see, where's my end? There it is. I'm going to stack it on my shoulder like this, and it should feed off. Ideally, it'll just feed off my shoulder, and I won't have to, wad it up in a ball or anything. And the other thing I do, and this is really, I learned this from watching videos, and I thought, there's no way this works. And I'm here to tell you, it does. This is an ordinary one of those little, rubber palmed gloves. They actually make these for quilting, and I forget what they're called. But sometimes you get them and the index and middle fingers and the thumb are cut out of them. So you have that feeling in your fingers. But I went to the Dollar Tree and spent $1.25 on a pair of these. And I will tell you, it makes a huge difference in how you can maneuver the quilt, as because you really have to manhandle these things to get, as you're going down the quilt, if it falls off the edge, the weight of that starts pulling forward, and it can throw you off or pull you off your binding or whatever. So having this glove that just grips onto that fabric more tightly really, really does help. So I have my trusty glove on here, woo-woo, and I'm gonna give myself about this much of a tail free, and I'm gonna line this up. I hope you can see what I'm doing. I'm gonna line this up on the edge of my quilt So I'm going to drop my foot and we're going to stitch down. I'm going to adjust a little bit, pull off a little slack. So far it's working. And I'm coming to a corner here. So, and what's really cool about this new foot I bought, that I mentioned it way back earlier in the video. Oh, see, now my binding's falling off my shoulder. Is that it has a lot of markings on it, guide marks. So I need to stop my stitching about 1/4 of an inch from the edge of my quilt. The quarter edge of the quilt here, the edge, before I get to the corner and actually stitch there. So I've stopped there. I leave my needle down. No, that's not true. I lied. I'm going to back stitch a couple stitches. Then I'm going to cut my thread, lift my needle. Oh, I forgot one more step. Sorry. You just kind of forget all the things when you're trying to explain it. So I'm going to drop my needle down and then just sew off the corner. That's what I do. Then I pull this. This is going to be tricky because we have to get the quilt out of the way of the camera. Ugh. So then what I do here at the corner, and this helps our corners miter. It gives you that nice, like a picture frame angle. So I fold it. So this is the new direction I'm going to be going here. The new direction right here. I'm going to fold this back, like right along that place where I sewed off the corner. That helps kind of helps you keep that angle. And then I'm going to fold it even with the edge of the quilt and hold on to it and put it right back. Pull the thread out, put it right back under the needle. So a few stitches, go backwards, and then I'm going to continue on down this next side. And I'm going to, sorry, quilt's going to go through the shot. Whoop! So then I'm going to go down the next side, just like I just did. I'll keep going a little ways. Yep. Okay. So I'm going to stop there because I need to readjust the quilt because my binding just slipped off the edge. Okay. So I'll meet you back here when I'm done sewing the binding on. Still stitching. Still stitching. And my binding is now all in my lap. All right. We're back. I'm around all 4 corners and now I just have a little bit of space here at this edge, at the starting point. I put, let me scoot you back just a hair and see if you can see a little better. Okay, yeah. So here's where I started and I stopped stitching. Oh, there's probably 8 or 9 inches right here of a little bit of unfinished edge to do. So I have to decide where I'm going to place that. Okay, that's good because there's a seam right here. The one thing you don't want to have happen is for the join at the end of this to happen right on one of these binding seams. Not because it looks bad or whatever, because you really can't see these seams in this fabric especially, but it would create a big bump and you don't want that. So I'm going to decide that I'm going to make the join happen. I just folded back some of my fabric here. Make the join happen right about there. And I'm just going to snip this like that. And so I have a little piece left over here. And then what I have to do, here's my big tail that's left over. So since my binding is 2.5 inches wide, I'm going to use this little piece I snipped off. I'm going to lay it right at the edge of my starting binding. I'm going to lay it right there. I'm going to lay this end tail over the top of it, and I'm just going to cut it right at the edge of that scrap piece of fabric I put in there. I don't know that you can actually see that, but that I'm doing that. So I'm gonna do it just shy of that piece of fabric. I'm gonna, of the edge of that, I'm gonna cut it about a scissors width shorter than I need to, than this piece of fabric is, because then you don't kind of have, what word am I looking for? Excess, that would create kind of a wave. So then I save all my bindings. I haven't done anything with them yet, but I had an idea. While I was pressing, I had an idea. So now I'm going to take this side of my binding and flatten it out with the right side up. And then I'm going to take this end and place it, and I'm going to pin this for sure. I'm going to pin this, and we're going to match up all the edges, the corners here. Ugh, fuzzy, my nose itches. I'm going to pin it here and draw it up a little bit. And I'm going to pin it on the other side over here, just to hold it nice and in place. And then I am going to, I think I can sew this diagonal line without having to draw one. So, and the quilt's kind of in the way, so you can't see what I'm doing. So you just, basically you do what I did when I was sewing all the strips together. I'm going to sew a diagonal line and trim that off and fold it out and in half. Okay, so here we go. All right, we'll cut the thread and take the pins out. And always, 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 before you cut off this excess fabric, if you're ever doing this, if you ever decide to make a quilt in your binding, make sure that when you pull that binding tight, that it's going the right way. Ask me how I know. I've done that a couple of times where I cut that fabric off, cut that corner off, and I had sewn it backwards. And so I had to just figure it out. I had to do some magic. I had to do some real critical thinking. So I'm just going to trim this off now because I know it is right. And then I'm going to kind of just finger press this seam open so it will lay flat like so. And then I'm going to, if I don't knock the camera over, I'm going to sew this on, or close up this gap here with the machine. Okay, Yahoo! The quilt has binding on it, and I'm not going to show this part because it's boring and you've seen me iron before. But what I will do now is take it to the iron, and I will fold this back away from the quilt and smooth it, so it's nice and smooth and that seam gets nice and flat. And then, so, hey, the next step is the hand stitching, where I will flip this binding over to the back side, like so, and I will stitch that down by hand. And we are going to be adding the buttons to, she's upside down to you, sorry. We're going to add the little buttons here too. So that's part of the handwork. So exciting, exciting. Yay. We'll see you in the next one.